Hi, folks, and welcome back. We are live for the HackHate midweek live stream, where we'll be talking to Ross Daniels from the Continuous Policing Improvement Command and Arik Chowdhury from WebRoots Democracy. So I'm going to introduce, or rather, I'm going to ask Ross to introduce himself first. So stand by. Hi, Ross. Welcome. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to meet you online. My name's Ross Daniels, and I lead the Continuous Policing Improvement Command in the Met. Now, we're the team that lead on improving how we do things in the Met for our own people and for the people of London. So within that, I've got responsibility for organisational learning, policy and demand reduction in the Met. Also within my portfolio, I've got responsibility for the Met's Central Hate Crime team, who are the subject matter experts providing advice and guidance to our local boroughs and leading on policy and best practice for the whole of the organisation. So hate crime has a significant impact on its victims because it attacks the very essence of who we are. This is not about free speech, but about protecting people from the hate that separates and divides us. And I'm really keen to hear more about your ideas that you've started to put in place to support us with this. I'd just like to say thank you for joining this hackathon and looking forward to the discussion this evening. So thank you, Lewis.
Lovely, thank you very much. And we will absolutely be taking a look at some of the ideas that people have already been sharing in the ideation document in a little bit. So I'm going to pop you backstage just for a minute, and I'd like to introduce Arik Chowdhury from WebRoots Democracy. Hi, Arik. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Lewis, and thanks for inviting me to this. My name is Arik Chowdhury. I'm the founder and director of WebRoots Democracy, which is a think tank focused on progressive and inclusive technology policy. So basically, I do research on how technology is affecting society, so issues such as social media regulation, which is quite relevant to this hackathon. And in particular, I authored a report in 2018 called Kinder, Gentler Politics, which was all about online abuse and the rise of online abuse in political debate, and looked at how it arises amongst different communities, in particular amongst people of colour and young women of colour who are interested in politics, but also looked at the kind of ideas and challenges that policymakers face with regards to tackling online abuse. So covered all sorts of areas such as how to regulate and hold to account the big tech companies, but also the kind of impacts we can have on individuals in terms of sanctioning those who are repeated offenders, whilst ensuring that we don't have law enforcement spending all of their time online, but also about re-educating people and just ensuring generally that online debate can be a space for free conversation, but without any of the negatives and any of the hate speech that we see today. So really interested to hear everyone's ideas and see if I can contribute in any way in terms of different areas to focus on, perhaps.
Lovely, thank you. So I'm going to bring back Ross Daniels now, and this is a question to both of you, which is around the use of technology. So Arik, you've talked about technology already and how it can be a powerful tool for anti-racism. I'd love to hear from you both a little bit more about some of the things that perhaps you'd expect to be able to do in the modern age with technology as it is, but perhaps are a little frustrated, perhaps the technology hasn't fulfilled that need yet. And I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on how people behave on social media, and maybe how that also bleeds across into the real world. Who would like to go first?
I don't mind. So I think from my point of view as someone who focuses on like policy changes, a lot of what we need to do on social media in the UK, given that a lot of these companies are based in the US, outside of our jurisdiction, outside of our ability to effectively regulate and design. A lot of my interest is what kind of nudges can we do domestically that will alter either people's behaviors or the behaviors of the tech companies themselves. So, for example, all of the work that's been done by researchers on the prevalence of online abuse or the prevalence of disinformation, that can be done domestically in different countries, right? And pressure the big tech companies to take action on it. Similarly, education campaigns domestically could educate people on how to best use social media, how to report instances of abuse, how to to think before posting, right? And one of the issues I think with social media generally is one of the main shifts between social media and the internet and everything that came before it is this ability for anyone to post anything and publish anything, right? You weren't able to do that before the internet, before the rise of the internet, before the rise of social media platforms. And that comes with all sorts of problems, one of which I think is just the speed of posting. So an interesting idea, I think, would be, are there ways in which we can slow down how people post and just make them think before posting, right? And think, is what I'm about to say kind or necessary? And this is actually used in a lot of different places offline, right? So one example is paracetamols, right? When you buy paracetamols, they come in individual packets, right? You have to press out each individual paracetamol. And one of the reasons for that is there's research that shows that reduces the likelihood of people overdosing or taking overdoses of paracetamol. And therefore, it's a really small nudge that we can do here domestically. Are there similar kind of nudges that we can do with social media that maybe would slow people down or make them consider these different things and just add a bit of friction between being able to post something and between the thought process? So that's just one idea I throw out there.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Ross, did you have any thoughts around, particularly from a policing perspective?
Yes, that's really helpful, and I think I would echo a lot of the points that have been raised there. So some of the things I jotted down that I wanted to say, actually, you've covered. So I think just to reiterate, effective regulation is absolutely key for us, and actually the ability to be able to change behaviours, as described, where we've got people that are hiding behind social media. We must be better at being able to respond to that and being able to change the behaviour, and that sort of education campaign that Arik talked about, absolutely vital for me, and I think that's really key. Also, how to report hate crime as well, and increasing the opportunities for people to be able to do that, because as we know, hate crime is underreported, and we're keen that however small something is or something, how people may feel it, we do want that to be reported to us so that we can investigate it, we can bring offenders to justice and get a better understanding of the true levels of hate crime.
Thank you. Also really interesting. And as you were both talking, I was jotting down what I think are the numbers of interesting related projects that some of our participants have pitched in the ideation document. So I'm just going to pull up that document. And this shouldn't take a moment. There we go. And I'm going to slightly adjust the size of the screen. That did not impact the view of the document. Okay, so looking at numbers 9 and 10, I thought were very interesting, particularly around the idea of nudging. So number 10, I think, is a picture for a bot that can detect when people are posting hateful speech on media and give them a prompt. So suggest to them that they may want to think again or think twice, which I appreciate is not quite the same as an adjustment to the behavior of posting, but it seemed like a really interesting approach. But also something where there's, the risk of accidentally tone policing or taking things too far. And I wondered if either of you had experience of times when an intervention like that had gone really well and a time when it hadn't gone so well.
It's a really good idea. It reminds me actually of cigarette packets, right? Where you have warnings on it that says, smoking increases the chance of cancer or lowers your fertility. And I wonder whether you could adjust that idea to also send like statistics or interesting research to people who perpetrate online abuse. So you could have something like a bot that says, it looks like you've posted, I don't know, a racist comment. Did you know that 32% of people in the UK, XYZ, right? You get the idea. That could be quite interesting, I think, and maybe would just help to disseminate research to the people that need to read it, but also maybe make people just think twice before they post something similar. Again, I think that could be quite an interesting like adjustment to that idea. But I haven't heard of anything similar, so it'd be quite interesting.
I really, really like that idea, and that idea of a warning really quickly. Make people think twice. Be absolutely clear that that's not acceptable. And doing that very early and very quickly, I think, is a really good idea.
Lovely. There have been some other projects, and I'm gonna skip up to number 1. If this will load, yes, it will. There we go. Number 1. So Ross, you were talking about making it easier to report, and one of the ideas that I think's gathered a little bit of steam already amongst some of our participants is the idea to create a plugin that people can simply just with a few clicks make a report, and that plugin would simply help you to collect the evidence you need and then send it to the right place. And it looked really interesting, and I wondered if that's something you might consider using in your own lives, if you encountered these sorts of things, and if you thought it had value.
Yeah, no, I think it does. Sorry that I'm viewing it off of my smartphone, so the writing's quite small for me. But yeah, no, that looks something again that is a really interesting idea. And as we've mentioned, and I'm sure some other colleagues have mentioned, hate crime is underreported, and we do want that reported to us so that we can get a proper understanding of the level of hate crime that we've got. So I think something like that again is a really good example and would create that sort of the opportunity to do that. Yeah, really, really good.
Lovely. So on that, and on the question of having a proper understanding of the level of hate crime that you're encountering, there were actually quite a few projects that talked about looking at levels of hate, perhaps in geographical areas over time and things like that, and using data sources like Twitter to produce sort of interesting time series so that you could see if there were trends. And Ross, I wondered if as a team, your hate crime team at the Metropolitan Police, you had access to those kind of insights, or if that's something that would actually be helpful to you.
No, that would be very helpful to us. So we're generally working off allegations that are reported to us. So any other mechanism of helping us to build a picture, particularly if it's by borough or area of London, at any particular time, that helps us with our response, and also giving our advice out to our local BCU. So our Central Hate Crime team have got the oversight of all of the hate crime that's occurring in London, as is reported to the police, and then we use that to work with our local boroughs to help them with various tactics. So anything that helps to increase that knowledge and information would be something that would be really, really well received by us.
Lovely.
Cool if you could break it down by constituency as well, just in terms of like a way to get MPs interested and lawmakers interested. They might be
great. Yeah. And that ability to bring, and that ability to bring in other stakeholders, beyond policing.
So in fact, I think there were a couple of different projects that suggested doing something very similar to that. So there, in fact, Ross, this may be an interesting question for you. Project idea number 24 was about ingesting data that has been already collected by agencies, including the Metropolitan Police, into a system called Elasticsearch, which would allow really insightful queries to be run on the data straight away, just sort of out of the box. And I wondered if that's something that perhaps not in the context of a hackathon, but perhaps further down the line, the Met might be interested in collaborating on, or if that data is unfortunately too difficult to reach.
No, absolutely. I mean, in principle, it does sound like something that we would be interested in. I don't know what the implications are from a data perspective, but in principle, yeah, that's something that we'd be happy to look at with our team.
Lovely. And in fact, I'll blow my own trumpet for a moment. Idea number 28 was one that I added today, which was almost exactly what you'd suggested, Eric, around generating reports geo-bound by county to help inform MPs of the state of their particular area. And I think there's some real interest in that. And I think there's interest in just making a regular publication even.
Yeah,
about
monthly or like quarterly, you could see like, you know, where the hotspots are, and then over time you can say, you know, online hate has increased by X% across these regions of the UK, and that could become a really interesting data set.
Yeah, lovely. There's also project number 6, which it takes me a moment to scroll back to, I'm afraid. Here we go, which I thought might also interest you. Looking at seasonal trends in hate speech, which is something that didn't even occur to me there might be. So I don't know if that's
interesting. I mean, there's I heard that, I think there's a report by Glitch. I don't know if you've heard of them. It's like an anti-abuse charity. They put out a report. I didn't read it yet, but the headline was that online abuse has increased during the pandemic, mainly because people are spending more time online. So I guess seasonal, you would imagine maybe in winter, people spending more time indoors, more time online. That could be a seasonal trend. Or it could be things like when there's a big national event, like a football match, or let's say the Britain's Got Talent final the other day, there could be trends around big events like that, where you would expect there to be. Yeah, it'd be quite interesting to understand that with real data today.
Yeah, it looks really interesting. Some really great ideas here.
Yeah, I'm certainly aware that particularly the Metropolitan Police really benefit from having an understanding of trends and the way things are going in order to be able to assign resources. So I wonder if that could feed in quite nicely to resources available to hate crime teams with an expected surge of reports and things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Lovely. Okay. So we've had a look at a few of the projects, and I think I'm just going to go to Discord to see if anybody's mentioned any projects they'd like us to bring up. At the moment, it's reasonably quiet on Discord. I think people are just happy to watch. So maybe we should talk about idea number 7, which is the one just below, which is about finding allies. And the proposal is to build a network of networks to help people organize. And I guess my question is there value in this? Are there people who simply don't know where to turn, but they want to do something good? And if so, is this a good approach? And how would you let people know about it?
So I don't know if you can share a link to that report I wrote, but if you look at ARC Kind Agenda Politics, Web Roots Democracy, one of the ideas in there was to create, or was for the tech companies, but to try and foster or incentivize a kind of online neighborhood watch. So you could create networks of volunteers who actively report instances of abusive comments or whatever. So it doesn't need to rely purely on the victim to report them, because anyone on Twitter, for example, anyone can report a tweet. So you could create communities. You maybe spend, I don't know, an hour on the weekend kind of reporting things. And if there's a way to incentivize that or to formalize that, I think that would actually be quite useful. Oh, that's cool, we did it. Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, actually. And yeah, it's similar to the traditional concepts of a neighborhood watch, right? And if you do that, I would recommend looking up what the pros and cons have been of traditional neighborhood watches. Because one of them, I think, for example, is these sorts of things can also have racial biases. So you have certain communities being reported and not others. Very similar actually to there was a report by Privacy International on the Amazon Ring doorbells and how they were being used to report crimes, and they also had a racial bias, basically black people being more reported than white people disproportionately on these Amazon Ring cameras. But I think that the concept is really good, and I think there would actually be quite a big benefit of having a formal kind of community that is dedicated to this kind of activity.
Lovely, and I think that ties in with a different idea, which I'm very quickly trying to find on my list. Talking about crowdsourcing people who could help to categorize hate speech as well. So a use for a community where perhaps people aren't called on every day to intervene as an ally, but could help out through classifying data as well. So we've had a couple of comments from a few people, which I'm just going to bring up now. So a question to each of you actually is, what are some of the biggest pain points in your jobs, and what would save you a lot of time or resources if it could be solved? And I guess this is coming from participants who would like to build a project that's going to directly help people working with these particular problems.
So it's not really a problem per se, and something that I think would benefit the research community that I haven't seen a lot of work done on is non-text based hate speech. So obviously, traditionally, a hate speech can only be done through verbal action, right? But you can also have hateful activity in the sense of memes or pictures or videos or GIFs, which is very little research on in terms of moderating and just research on prevalence generally. Everything is based on text because that's the easiest to analyze. But it would be quite interesting. I don't know if there's people who are smart enough to do it, who could try and build a sort of taxonomy of non-text based online hate, the challenges of that, ways of detecting it, ways of mapping out its prevalence. I think that would benefit the research community quite a lot. I'm not 100% sure how much research has been done on that or how feasible it is to even analyze that kind of data.
I think it would be really interesting to see what people come up with. There's certainly room for. Go ahead, Ross.
No. Sorry, Lewis, you go first.
I was about to say there's certainly room for a hybrid model where initially people were to categorize images, and then after that, machine learning could pick up the slack and learn from what they've done. Sorry, Ross, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about it slightly differently, and I don't know how it would work with our internal computer mechanisms and data sources. So there might be some issues with it, but I was just thinking about our small central hate crime team at the moment manually go through all of the hate crime reports on a daily basis, because we're doing things like we're making sure that that there's compliance with the national hate crime policy, and so that we're in a position for our subject matter experts to advise our local officers on BCUs. And I'm just trying to think that's a manual task at the moment, and I was just trying to think if there's some way of automating that or trying to pick out the key information so that the team can go straight to the bits where their value added is needed. But I don't know how that would sit with our own internal systems. But yeah, that would be something that definitely would be interested in looking at.
That's really interesting. We certainly saw at last year's Hack the Police at least one project that looked at plain text reports, so unstructured text, and was able to answer questions about what it found inside the text. So if we were able to build something similar, perhaps this year, that could look at a crime report about a hate speech event and reason for itself whether the various steps had been taken, where it saw evidence that inside the report it mentions that the victim had been given the information they needed, or that certain avenues of investigation had been explored. That may be very achievable, and that would then simply be finding a way to connect the crime report system with the analysis system, or perhaps even, worst case scenario, a copy paste from one to the other, just to get information out. It's an interesting idea and certainly something we could look at. So we've had a few more questions in the meantime. Let me just roll back up. So one comment from one participant is that DCMS, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, might be interested in a regular report on hate speech by county, which is interesting and I think valuable, certainly something that they might look at, decide on the value of. So a question to the speakers, and Arik, I'm aware that you said you'd be out of time shortly. So thank you very much for joining us. And in fact, I think what I'll do is I'll skip this question, which is about policing, and see if there's another question that I can put to you before you have to leave. So I see we've also got a copy of your report now in our Discord, which is lovely. Some comments around how good it would be to get a database of non-text based hate-related material. So thank you very much for the suggestion. I think it'd be really interesting to see if we could build something. So a question to both of you, really. So the question asks, what's the effect of manually going through reports on the officers doing it? So do they suffer from a mental health point of view, looking at, repeat incidences of hatred? Does it alter the way they perceive things and people? And Arik, maybe you can look at it from the perspective of somebody who might see reports of hatred regularly. Does it alter the way you look at the world?
So there's a lot that's been written about the impact on human content moderators for tech companies. I don't know about in the police specifically, but in big tech companies like Facebook and Google, often this job is outsourced to like low-paid workers outside of the US. And when it comes to things like child pornography, I understand that can have a quite significant mental health impact. And often when people think content moderation is automated, it never really is. It's never fully automated because you still need people to tag the content originally. So I think the more automation in that sense will be, the more you can automate the whole process, I think the more beneficial impact it will have on people's mental health. And especially during the pandemic, there may have been an impact on the human content moderators for tech companies, that they may be relying more on automation, and that might produce more negative results as well. So things which aren't actually hate speech or aren't unacceptable comment are being flagged. So it could be interesting to see whether there's been any shift over time, or at least over time of the remainder of the pandemic. I think that would be quite interesting.
Yeah, and I'd expect we'd see some really interesting odd statistics from the pandemic anyway. Surges in certain kinds of behavior and drop-offs in others. Russ, do you have any feedback on how working with hate crime affects the officers to do it?
So we have internal mechanisms in place to support officers and staff that are involved in looking at certain materials. So we have occupational health services that you can self-refer, or your manager can refer you. We have support networks in place and regular risk assessments that are undertaken as well. So we do a lot of wraparound support for people that are exposed to material. So I think as an organisation, we would say that we do quite a lot and we offer quite a lot. And all of that information is readily available and people know how to access it. And there is a responsibility on line managers as well to check in with people to make sure they're okay.
That's really interesting. Thank you. So that's something that's there are facilities in place. Do you feel like it's used more than for other forms of crime, or is that something you'd need statistics to comment on?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that, Lewis. No,
Fair enough.
I'd have to check
All right.
that. Yeah.
All right,
Thank
Lewis.
you. Well,
Yeah. But really interested to see how this goes. When do projects finish?
So the deadline for registering your project, so deciding what it is you'd like to do and who you'd like to work with, is this Saturday, 1 p.m. And from then on, we've got 2 weeks to really get stuck in, build something, and prepare your presentations. At the end of those 2 weeks, you'll submit a presentation, and we'll hold a participant presentations feed where everybody will get a chance to show what they've built. And then we'll look into judging. And I believe the plan is at the moment that judging will be the week after.
Okay, cool. I'd love to see those. And again, I'll just push that report, have a read of it, see if it inspires any different ideas as well.
Lovely. Thank you so much, and thank you for taking part.
No worries. Chat to you guys soon.
Catch you soon.
Thank you.
So Ross, I think we have some more questions around investigation and policing. So how do police go about investigating reports of hate speech online? And would they look into the user and attempt to gather further evidence based on that user on just one platform or more platforms? Or are there any preemptive investigations, any proactive work where leads are generated through detection online?
Yeah, so I think it's a good question. So I think we do bits of all of it. We do, so as I mentioned earlier, our team are looking at all of the offences that are reported to us and prioritising the activity that needs to be taken in response to those. Yeah, we do some proactive work, possibly not as much as we potentially could do. I'm just thinking purely from the Central Hate Crime team, but we are out with our. If I think about the proactive communications that we do as an organisation, we do communicate out to community groups, our partners and stakeholders, around sort of what sort of things are acceptable, providing reassurance around anything that somebody perceives as an offence that they should report it to us and it will be investigated. Going back to that bit that I was saying earlier about it being underreported, and we're keen that people come forward and report things to us. There's a whole plethora of activity that goes on. So what was the second part of the question, Lewis?
That's okay.
I lost the audio.
That's okay. There was a question around whether police would look into the user who perpetrates that hate speech online,
yeah, depending on
and
the
whether they
yeah.
do it on just one platform, or if you'll extend the investigation onto other platforms that they might be using.
Yeah, so I think the answer is yes to both of those, and it depends on the nature of the allegation and the severity of the allegation.
Lovely, thank you. So I think we may have another question incoming. Someone is currently typing. I guess I'm interested to know about access to the tools that your officers need. So, for instance, most police officers in the Metropolitan Police have some kind of limited firewalled access to internet and social media. And I think, for perfectly good reasons. And my guess is that officers investigating hate crimes and so on and so forth will have wider access and also access to additional tools. And I wondered if you could comment about maybe some of those tools and what capabilities those officers have.
Yes, so we do. I would have to speak to the team actually to get the detail around that. I don't actually know the specifics. But yeah, and I think so what we do generally is, with the police, we have quite tight firewalls around all of our stuff, but dependent on the roles and the speciality of your role, then that can be relaxed in terms of enabling you access to things that you wouldn't ordinarily, and that's based on your role. But actually the systems and what level of access people have got, I couldn't answer that off the top of my head.
No, that's absolutely fair enough. Thank you. So I guess we're reaching the end of our time. I was aiming for roughly 40 to 45 minutes. So thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to remind everyone that this Saturday is Saturday's the day for registering your projects. If anybody is still looking for a project or would like an idea to get stuck into, don't hesitate to contact us. There are a lot of ideas now sitting on the document and a lot of people who I'm sure would love to work with you. If you'd like to do something on your own, if you'd like to start your own idea, talk to us about that too. Perhaps we can help you, perhaps we can connect you with the right resources. So for now, I think we're going to sign off. Thank you very much, Ross, for your time.
Could I just say, Lewis, before I go, just want to say thank you to everyone who's online. And just looking at some of the ideas that have already been put forward, they look really, really good, really, really interesting. And we're keen to get into a bit more detail around those. And yeah, certainly any other ideas. If there's anything that anybody wants to run past me or the team, more than happy to do that. And it's looking really good. So thank you, Lewis, and thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. One last reminder then. There are a couple more check-ins during the week, and there'll be one final, in fact, there's a Discord check-in at 8 p.m. tomorrow. There'll be one final Discord check-in before the deadline, so people will have an opportunity to talk to the team, make sure that they're ready, they feel ready, they've got everything they need to submit. We can talk you through submitting, and looking forward to seeing what you've got. Thank you very much for joining us.